where you're kind of with yourself and you just want to make sure that you have gas in the car. And, because it's like a stretch of like 500 miles of like almost nothing.
I noticed that, and in that process, we passed by some farm, or it was I don't know where in Kansas it was, but there was a lot of meat packing processes,
Hmm.
and my friend and I gagged all the way through that area. It was so bad. Welcome back, all my Courage, Confidence, Connections podcast fans. I'm Janice Debo. I am your host, and today my guest is Julie Johnson, and she is hailing from Missouri. I think I got that right. So,
You got
anyway,
that right.
I know you just told me. Thank you. And welcome to the show.
All right, glad to be here, Janice.
Well, I'm excited for you to tell our audience all about you. Looks like you're in the weeds out there, though.
I know I am in the weeds. Yeah, I'm sitting downstairs right now, like where because it's quiet and it's like I have a background in right because it's I'm in my office and we're moving things around. So I was like, and for some reason on Zoom, my background with all of my business stuff is not launching. So I'm like having to kind of improvise right now.
That's
So
always fine with me. It looks relaxing.
yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to being outside later too. Yeah, so my work in the world is really in the area of digital health. My background is in real is in technology and learning systems design and healthcare. So, so I really leverage more into the digital health and app development. And when I say development, I mean more like product management. I don't do code. I
Well,
know code, I just don't do code. But I do more like the content development in apps and working in the intersection of usability and product development management.
wow, I know. I've seen some of your work. It's amazing all that you can do. A couple
Thank
people
you.
I want to connect you with that are a similar mindset. So I think I can get you. Well, maybe I ought to do a panel podcast sometime with all you brainiacs. So,
Sounds good.
yeah, because that's not my field at all. But I'm glad somebody does it for sure. Now,
Yeah.
I know you're in Missouri right now. Is that where you were born and raised?
No, well, close.
Okay.
On the other side of the state. Although I have spent some time in the Pacific Northwest too. Um, I am actually from Kansas City, Missouri. On the other side, on the Kansas side. Yeah, and that was just a totally different experience than over here. It's even though we're only about 5 hours from each other, it's just a very different cultural space between the two sides of the state.
Oh, that's interesting to know. And I've been through both of those places at different times. And I've been through Kansas. I went through, it was but
You remember Kansas. It's
oh,
long.
so forgetting Kansas. I had a friend whose mother lived in Liberal, Kansas. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, what that is a strange place, I gotta say.
It
Don't be
is it's
it is.
it's a strange drive to when you drive because we drive to Denver a lot. So it's always a really interesting, I don't call it good or bad. It's just kind of this interesting experience where you're kind of with yourself and you just want to make sure that you have gas in the car. And, because it's like a stretch of like 500 miles of like almost nothing.
I noticed that, and in that process, we passed by some farm, or it was I don't know where in Kansas it was, but there was a lot of meat packing processes,
Hmm.
and my friend and I gagged all the way through that area. It was so bad, but
Sounds about right.
I know. But I tell you what, when we came through there, it was late. It was late November, early December, and it was pheasant hunting season, and I think it was in Liberal. It was around Liberal, Kansas, and where we stopped for gas and to get a snack. All these hunters were out, and we were just going, "What in the world?" And it was pheasant. I think it was pheasants that they were hunting out there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have some really interesting memories about Kansas. So,
I'm sure. Yeah, I have memories of driving through there with my dad, like growing up going skiing in Colorado. And yeah, it was always an adventure, going across driving across Kansas to Denver is always it's always a hair and I've done it 3 times with my kids too, by myself without my partner. He kind of lets me do the traveling and he's kind of a homebody, so know how to work that together. But I done my kids, and I was always like, okay, there's nobody else but me here. So I gotta make sure. And same thing as driving through Texas too. It's the same feeling. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, there's nobody else but me and the kids, and make sure I've got all my stuff up. This is the courage piece, confidence if we're staying on brand, but driving through these kind of long tunnels of,
Yeah.
of highway with just you.
Oh, I know. It's like it never ends, and you're just going on and on and on. And I got that feeling in parts of Colorado as well because it's a
Hmm.
barren country. But living here in Oregon now, you can experience some of that in certain areas. It's interesting, and you're by yourself going, "Oh my goodness, okay, car, I love you. Hang in
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. I know. It really makes you kind of think about it when you kind of have to, you're a solo traveler, you know?
Yeah, so growing up, you guys were into winter sports and you drove all the way to
Hmm.
Denver to ski. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Was there anything else about your childhood that would play into obviously not just courage, confidence, and connections, but that led you to do what you're doing now? Inspiration.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So my dad was a runner, and we
Oh,
were always like into like health, and my dad also was a life insurance agent. And so like, but when you grow up with like a dad as in life insurance, it's kind of a weird, it's probably like having a dad that's like a mortician or something. You know what I mean? Like they're always like I have a couple of friends, they're always like talking about like, here's the death benefit. This is what would happen if you, like, when I die. It's just, you have some really interesting, adult conversation, which is great because they're all relevant, but it's like definitely was like the center of like my, like a lot of the things we would talk about.
wow.
Anyway, he was very prepared for many things. But one of the things that he talked about a lot was health, and he would like love to go to the doctor and like get his blood pressure measured. And he like would like tell us all like what it was. This is very my dad. He's very eccentric. But like he would be like, my blood pressure is at this great height. After I ran, he like we used to run marathons and stuff. And
Boy.
so like when you grow up with that sort of mentality, you're kind of embracing this like, digital, this like health and wellness perspective. I
Hmm.
My sister and I adopted it too, and we were both like into sports, track and field and running and stuff. And it followed me. I'm a yoga teacher now, and another part of my life. And I do a lot of health and wellness retreats and stuff. And so, it definitely planted a seed inside of me as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. What else did you enjoy as a kid? Obviously in the sports. What else did you enjoy doing growing up in Kansas? What was there to do?
We were in Kansas City, so there was more like it was more of the city, so there was a lot to do there. We did, if you grew up in the Midwest, we had a lot of like there was people love potlucks, my mom used to always go to bunko nights from like the 80s, like she used to like tag me along with her. We did a lot of there was a lot of that kind of very Midwestern culture, but my sister and I, we used to, this is like the 80s and the 90s. So there was lots of hanging out at the malls in the Kansas City suburbs, and which don't even like seem like such, my kids are teens now too. And I'm like,
Wow.
there's no malls. I was like, we used to go to the mall for that, but you guys don't have malls. So,
Wow.
it's not, I know, I know, I
No
know.
malls?
Not as many, no.
Wow.
But yeah, we used to go to malls, skating rinks, which are a thing of the past. Although I keep seeing little like Instagram things that they're coming back. So, but definitely skating rinks were like the hot thing, But it's so funny because we didn't have cell phones back then, and I
Oh,
remember just my parents dropping me off with my sister and just giving us like like here's $5. We'll see you in 5 hours. We'll be, you know what I mean? I was like, we have just our society has like gotten so different. I mean, we were like 9 and like 10. You know what I mean? I was like, wow, we really are just. And I'm a parent now, so I'm like, man, yeah, my kids did not get that experience.
yeah, that's so odd too, because as a kid, we lived in a lot of rural areas, so malls were not really the thing. We'd have to go out of town. However, as an adult, I was still around a lot of malls. And in North Carolina, it seems like they've weathered the storms better than out here because
Yeah,
yeah, they've opened up malls and made them like street side um sh
right,
shopping areas. What a different world. And speaking of, yeah, cell phones, no.
right,
And
right.
I love the jokes about how you hang up on somebody back then. You just it was on the wall. So
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's true. I remember it was funny because my kids will go back to my parents' house like with us in Kansas City when we go visit, and they'll like my parents still have like caller ID on, you know what I mean? Like the landlines. They're like, "Why don't we have this?" I was like, "Oh, this is like retro stuff." I was like, this is like how my childhood looked. They just ask questions like, "What is that?" And it's like an old phone with like a cord where
mhm.
you like dial in. I was like, "Yeah, that's what you use. Like it's the same phone." And kids are like,
Oh, I
"What
know.
is this thing?"
I know, and it's hard for you and I to relate probably to the difference because we've grown up with all these changes, and I think my generation has seen more technology changes, and when computers were introduced, and
Yes.
all these wonderful gadgets that I can date myself pretty funny here. I remember that my first cell phone was in a case and it was about the size of a brick.
Yeah, no, I remember those. That was our first cell phone, like 1989. I remember my dad came home and he was like, "Here's a car phone."
Car
And it
phone.
was like in a bag. Yeah, and it was in a bag and we were like, "Oh," he goes, "Only call me if you need something, but we still use the landline." I was like in like third or fourth grade. And I was like, "Okay." And it was like I remember that so critically. And then I remember, as you talked about the changes, I remember when my dad's car phone became a cell phone in like 1999. And I was like, "Oh, that's a big deal."
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing the things that we have seen change over the years. And speaking of skating rinks, I interviewed somebody the other day, and he grew up going to skating rinks and he learned to ice skate because his parents always took him inline skating. So he still goes to this day. So they're not completely out. It's amazing. He's still an avid inline skater.
Oh, they're great. I tried to get my kids into skating, especially my son. They were fine. They were not nearly as avid about as I was as a kid. But like they went through like a moment of it. But I went back to this we went back to skating rink and I was like, it's like really it's actually really fun. It's like good for your like mind too to like work through that motor pattern a little bit. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And so it's almost to a certain degree, kind of going back to our earlier conversation about like driving through Kansas, it's kind of like the same sort of mental field trip. You're like, okay, at the wheels here and my ankles are not, hopefully these things are going to be okay. Because if I twist my ankle, I don't want to walk out of here in crutches, the things you think about skating at, over 40 than you do, when you're 9 are a little different.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just amazing, but it's making a comeback. So that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And so you're really into the health field a lot, and I think we'll be talking for a while here about that. Let's talk about more detail of what you do, not just the technology, but the health part of it, because I know that affects everybody. We all have concerns about those things. So let's really delve into what you do, if you've got any great stories of healings or how you've helped people. Let's just
Sure.
venture down.
Sure. Yeah, so a lot of my work is in the area we would call it trauma informed care, and really we just call it human centered good bedside manner is like the really good way of like whenever try to talk to my mom about this, she's always like, "Isn't that just what people should do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's like, but that's not what we get, so that's why we have a separate thing." A lot of times
Yeah.
in healthcare. So a lot of my work is keep training individuals and leaders on one the leadership skills that they need in order to lead people from this more trusted space. Okay. We would call it trauma informed, but really it's all about reciprocity, empowerment, leading from behind is kind of what we talk about it from. A lot of us have trauma. A lot of us have, if we're going to really dig into our stories, a lot of us come from histories of trauma and abuse or have experienced it. I think the ACE study, which was by um, the CDC several years ago, like in the early 90s, I think they said 1 in 4 people have experienced some kind of childhood trauma.
Wow.
So, and that means that impacts our long-term um, health outcomes.
Hmm.
So if you've had childhood trauma and you score based off of their study, this like little checklist you do, if you score that, it's either I think it's I can't don't quote me on this, but I think if it's 4 or higher, you're at a higher risk of having some kind of adverse chronic illness. It could be heart disease, cancer, whatever. Um,
Oh yeah, because
obesity.
our body stores trauma in our body parts.
Yeah, that's I mean that's this is like the base study that like takes all of that information that we see in the wellness world now. This was that base study that's really interesting. If you want to know where all this comes from, look up the ACE study. So
Cool. Okay.
yeah, so that's kind of the baseline of my work. And so we teach if we know that about the people in our companies in our world,
Mhm.
then how does that shift the way, and maybe you don't know that, but I just assume that most people in there probably have had some sort of level of pressure or some sort of acute trauma that we probably just need to like remember, to be gentle with each other,
Yeah.
and give each other lots of grace.
Oh yes.
And, and so, because I was like, if you know those statistics and you have 12 people in the room, that means you probably have a good chunk of people that had some probably significant childhood abuse, and childhood traumatic stress.
And,
So
and
that's pretty high.
so in your life, is that and if you're comfortable talking about it, did you have some trauma that really motivated you to delve into this?
Yeah, yeah. For my family, my parents, I had a sibling with some mental health challenges that made childhood a little stressful, and so I think when we have complicated family members, which I think a good chunk of us can identify with that,
Mhm.
we always have, maybe they're not to the level of a mental health having mental health crisis, but you probably have someone challenging, on some spectrum. I think a lot of us can relate to that. That's why I try to realize like you probably have, my sister was kind of more on the extreme level, but
Oh,
someone probably has a complicated person in their life that you grew up with somewhere.
my older brother who passed last year developed epilepsy. I think he was 11 or 12, somewhere around there. And so when he passed, he had dealt with seizures for 50 some years. And it, you know, so as kids, he was catered to. I was a
Yeah.
second oldest, but he was catered to, and we all knew it. It was always on high alert with him, that kind of thing. So, and parents can't give full on attention to all kids when you've got several of us going on in there. And so,
Hmm.
but I imagine a lot of people don't realize that that is trauma, that that is, and even neglect is trauma, even if it's just minimal.
It is, and that's what I've always said. So a lot of my work has been less about like it's been about mostly like neglect, more so, and it's been about more neglect and the things that couldn't happen
Hmm.
versus the things did happen. So, my therapist and I have talked a lot about like, I was like, well, my parents were good, but they just had their hands full. And and she was like, right. So the absence of something happening is also something because you didn't have certain aspects or attention on you. And that means that is still, nothing is something. And so there's going to be things that you crave, but you didn't realize, or things that people had that you didn't quite get, you know, because, from an attachment level that you may not understand other people got that you didn't. So you don't know what you don't know what nurturing is if you never got that kind of nurturing. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting study that you're talking about too. Just the fact that, I mean, we do hear a lot more about, child abuse when it's a physical thing, and even just damaged adults trying to raise kids. It it does relate, but really, I've known for years now that both of my parents were emotionally unavailable, and
Right.
yeah, in writing my memoirs, I'm facing some really interesting things that I had not faced before. However, neglect, or just like you said, a lack of love, because maybe a parent didn't get it and they don't know how to give it. You can't give what you don't have.
Right, right. And so now we have a group of adults. Actually, my therapist and I just went through this the other day. We just were talking about like we have all these groups of adults that are craving like
Mm,
healthy relationships, but a lot of us we're the first generation that is able to either A, begin to formulate those patterns, those relationship patterns for the first time in our like lineage, you know,
no.
ever. So we don't have anything to compare it to except for like what our therapists have said, things we've read already, the internet. If we're going to talk about change, that is also a change here.
Absolutely. And I think that leads a lot of us to not knowing how to love ourselves, which has to come
Mm-hmm.
first. That's written about in many, many places. We do have to learn how to love ourselves, and you have to start off with liking yourself, I think, first. But
Yeah.
so you've seen this manifest in the workplace, from what I'm hearing,
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit.
Yeah, I've seen it manifest in the workplace and I've seen it manifest in people. I've taught, corporate and individual yoga classes, and we call it somatics, which is just like noticing the body. And so a lot of my work on top of like the leadership stuff is like learning is we have an app, okay, called it's called Let's Integrate.
Okay.
And the idea in the app is that we are learning how to sense our bodies, okay? Because lots of times if you've had childhood abuse or neglect, lots of times we don't know what it means to feel close to somebody. Like being within our bodies can feel very distant, very disconnected, or may not be able to sense our bodies. It may not feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
If you've had like childhood sexual abuse or anything like that, then the body can actually be kind of a space that feels a little bit, it can, I'm not saying for everybody, it's prescriptive, but it can feel like a disconnected place from you in
Mm-hmm.
your inside of your like who you are. So a lot of the things we do in our app are like little tiny practices to help us begin to attune one step at a time. We call them tiny signals,
Mm-hmm.
which is just learning to feel the body in short periods of times. And then as you build out a practice around it, then you can do like longer, like we call them flows. It might be yoga or it might just be like gentle movement for a couple of for 30 to 40 minutes. And then we have other workshops and stuff you can do inside of it. But it's that journey inside of the app that helps us with that because we come through the lens of we know that a lot of people that come to at least my work and the work of Integrate usually have had some experience something like that in their relationship with their bodies feels very disconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the word safe I can relate to, because that has come up for me a lot, and I've worked through quite a bit of it. Yet when you don't feel safe with yourself, you're not going to feel safe with other people. And you don't,
Yes, exactly.
and there's a huge lack of trust, a huge lack of trust.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what the whole process is how do we begin to feel safe with self? Well, first we have to learn, at least from my perspective, how we deal with the nervous system. Sensing like when am I feeling in distress?
Hmm.
Do I feel in distress? How do I even know when I'm in distress? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? But most of us find out through coping mechanisms. This is how we get to like health issues lots of times. Overeating, not eating, which is what I used to do. I used to just not forget to eat for like hours. That's how I knew I was not in a good space. You know, it might be, other coping mechanisms. It might be substance abuse. It might be other things, but that's how we don't know sometimes we're so disconnected from our bodies that we don't know when we're in distress inside or we're not feeling safe inside until we're, in addiction already.
Well, that's a good point. And that relates to a lot of it. There's so many issues, but starting with what you're discussing with your app, and it's always got to be about baby steps. And I say that
Yeah,
all the time.
all the
You
time.
you can't go from 0 to 120 with yourself and expect to make it work. And can you talk about the discouragement that people face when they're trying to move into a new space with themselves and others?
Oh yeah, yeah, I see that all the time in clients. So what I've seen lots of times in clients that are in that space is there's a will to go. They want to move into that bigger space without those patterns already developed inside of themselves. Okay, those patterns in their nervous system, those patterns in their mind. You need those patterns of consistent safety, that consistent um, mindfulness. Paying attention to yourself. That's how you build safety within is paying attention to yourself little by little, one step at a time. Lots of times, what I see is people go big too fast too soon, and it actually reminds them of trauma. And
Mm,
then they can self sabotage, and then they loop themselves back into a coping mechanism or avoiding it or not wanting to do it or resistance, whatever it is,
mhm,
and they're like, well, what happens? And it's like, well, you want to get there, but in order to get to that end space, we have to do like back it up like 20 steps.
yeah.
So you can be successful. And because it's that when we want to get to that goal too quickly, it ends up being this kind of weird, so I always forget what it's called, but like the I forgot, self-fulfilling prophecy,
Right,
of
right.
like I want to get there and I'm gonna get there and I'm gonna do it and I'm not gonna give myself the time and space to be realistic and do it.
Oh, we are impatient as a culture. I mean, look at
Right.
everything's got to be microwaved, and everything on between the technology in itself has pushed us beyond realism. I want to drive too fast. I want to eat too fast. I want my food. I want it now. Oh no,
Yeah.
actually, I wanted it yesterday. So it's a cultural thing. And can you give our audience an idea of a good success story that you've seen that would
Oh yeah.
that would love to hear that?
Yeah. So, I've had a client of mine who has a background in um addiction. And she learning to be in her body was really challenging. Learning to feel her body was really challenging. Lots of times when you've had a lot of um substance abuse and you only respond to big things, big highs or low lows, learning to feel these subtle aspects of your body
Yeah.
was like not inside of her. She could not connect like that. And slowly but surely over time, we started out doing like these tiny signals, what we like call them tiny signals, where we just learned, we call them anchor, like micro habitating with your nervous system or habit stacking is like what we call it. So we call it, I'm trained in BJ Fogg's work, which is called tiny habits, but it's like atomic habits. And it's essentially just building up. That's why I meant those micro habits of noticing your body
Mhm.
during a time of day that you're already doing something. That's how this person was able to make that first step. So for her, it was like, okay, after I brush my teeth, I'm going to just remember to breathe. Okay. And I'll notice the rise and fall of my breath. And then I'm going to celebrate that.
Oh.
Okay. That was the whole idea of celebrating is that you want to feel good when you make those tiny steps because she resorted to substance abuse to feel good. So well we need to build up those brain cells so they know when you're doing good you celebrate. We get those same eventually get those same chemicals going that you used to get from you know substances, other types of substances. So we're starting to build that dopamine up a little bit
Oh,
you
that's
know
great. Well, I was in a group conversation recently, and one of the individuals could not um, could not compliment themselves. He- That this person really felt it when other people did it. Now, I've been there where I needed that external, validation, the external compliments, whatever.
Mhm.
But I posed the question in the group. I asked them, do you not, can you compliment yourself and get the same feeling? And the answer was no. I mean, an emphatic no. I am
Yeah.
being the coach that I am, I had to pull myself back and say, okay. Uh, but it's
Right.
true. We live in a world of external validation, and you're teaching people to validate themselves and to feel it. I love that because I was in a group called Chicks Connect for quite a long time, ran one,
Yeah.
and the founder of the company, and it was we met locally and then we met online, that kind of thing. She would always say, celebrate the tiniest thing, celebrate the tiny, and I love the fact, breathe after you brush your teeth, celebrate it.
Yeah.
We don't be so hard on yourself. Celebrate every little thing that you can because you're worth celebrating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that approach because it also slows down. It slows us. So for this client, it slowed them down because they had kind of a fast-paced lifestyle, but also slowed them down after they brushed their teeth to really feel in to their emotions, to their bodies, the whole system, and was just able to sense in that one thing, oh, I have a body, I'm breathing, oh, and I brushed my teeth. So like in that one 30-second experience, we did a mind body connection. We celebrated, and we validated ourselves, we felt our bodies, and we took a breath. Awesome.
Oh, that is great. Do you find the practice of gratitude a part of what you do?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that is a practice of gratitude. Learning to validate yourself is a form of gratitude. Validating that you took time to pay attention, that you weren't just over in someone else's world or at work or wherever. You were in your own human experience.
I love that. I love that. We're going to have all of your information available, and I'll have you share with me so I can share at the end of the broadcast your links to the app and everything, how people can reach you.
Sure.
As we wrap this up, so we're keeping it close to a half hour for our audience, I want you to offer anything you want to offer as far as words of wisdom, story, whatever you'd like to share for the next few minutes, and the floor is yours.
All right. I think, and when we start talking about like building a tiny habit, I think what we're learning to do is also, we call it hold compassion or hold complexity with ourselves. And, in our app right now, we're doing a thing called holding the both and all. And what all that means is holding our human experience inside of ourselves with grace and like compassion, and that's really what a lot of the things we teach in the app and in our process is about, which is when we start doing those tiny habits, we are recognizing that we just celebrated something new. Our brain is doing something new after, yeah, some probably really hard stuff. Okay. That, you know, probably nobody really likes to talk about it at like a dinner table, but we acknowledge that both those things exist and those exist inside of us, and that's okay, and we can hold all of that inside, and that's not a part of our story. I mean, it's a part of who we are, but it's not who we are,
Right.
and we can create this new normal, with these new habits.
Hmm.
And so that's why we call it holding the both and all, which is we're holding our past and our present, our future is also in front of us, and we're also holding our emotions and how it feels. We're holding all of our humanity inside of us, and we can also learn to do something new.
That's fantastic. So you'll audience, you'll want to get this app. I do have it, and I haven't started practicing, but I'm inspired to now. We're always on a healing journey, but you have to allow yourself to heal and give yourself a lot of grace. And if nobody else gives you grace, you got to do it. So
Hmm. Yeah, it's a practice, and I always tell people giving yourself grace isn't letting yourself off the hook from self accountability, but it is saying, like, I always like to say, I say this to myself whenever I'm in a kind of maybe like a shame spiral. It's like, well, of course you feel that way. Of course, given what's happened to you, you would feel this way, or you find yourself in this thought process. So that way, it's not like it's recognizing the past happened, but also the present is full of compassion, and the future doesn't have to be that way either.
that's right. That's right. There's hope. and you'll be able to reach out to Julie
Mhm.
or myself if you can't reach her, and I can connect you. We're both in the business of helping people
Yep.
and healing. She's got a very deep level of healing going on here. And I thank you so much, Julie. So tell our audience one more time how they can reach you, and then we'll get the information available on the podcast at the end.
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of me is on our is on the website let'sintegrate.live. You can see the podcast, you can download the app there, you can get a whole world of like some of the work I do with Integrate and our whole platform where we practice these skills.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being my guest, and
Yeah.
this has been fun to catch up finally and
Yeah.
get to share what you do because you were so gracious to have me on yours. It
Yeah.
was, yeah, I love this kind of thing.
Yours
Audience,
should be up yours should be up soon, by the way, but the next week and a half. So
oh, hey, okay, great. Well, audience, thank you for tuning in and watch for another episode in the near future. Thank you, everyone.